Hello students, this is Aaron here, and I'm really excited for our very first lecture called Art Drawings That Serve and Eat No Crumbs. So I hope you enjoy. We have a little analogy in here related to Costco and little references to Adobe Fresco, Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator, and Procreate. That's what that last one is. And don't worry if you don't know those things yet. I will hold your hand through everything here. So just sit back and relax. I don't need you to take notes. Just relax and enjoy the presentation. Okay, and I'll do my best to keep it entertaining. I have a lot of fun nuggets in here. So let's lock in chat. I was told last semester to address my students as chat. I think that was a joke. I think it refers to anyways, doesn't matter. But I know this is online, so this doesn't pertain to you. But again, if you were here in person, no talking, phones away, and sometimes I have coffee for my students. Okay, well, let's get started. So today's presentation titled Presentation Drawings, PDs I call for short, sponsored by Costco, which is a joke, by the way. We are not sponsored by Costco, but Costco, if you want to come sponsor me, please come holler, acodden@slick.edu. So today's goals for our presentation, we want to understand presentation drawings, especially the role in presentations and when to use them. So a presentation drawing is very much different from a construction drawing. An architect's practice really hovers around the idea of a drawing, and drawings are our craft. They're what we do. They're our end deliverable. We don't make buildings, we draw them. And before we create construction documents, which are what you've done in Architectural Communication 2, or if you've taken also called the Revit class, but those are used to make a building. But before we get there, we tend to have some set of drawings that are used that appear very pretty and organized and beautiful. And those help sell our ideas, and those are called presentation drawings. And some examples of those range to, but this is not an exhaustive list, but they could include site plans, section cuts, collages, laser cut models, diagrams, and rendered floor plans. A laser cut model is not a drawing, but I will make you think of it as a drawing towards the end of the semester. It'll make more sense, I promise. Okay, so I recently got a Costco membership. And the thing with Costco is that they really reel you in with a low membership price, and then they reel you in even further with a free sample. And their hope with that free sample is that you'll buy the product and repeat the cycle, and the cycle stays solid, and you become a dedicated consumer, and you are obsessed with the brand. So I just want to show you, I recently got my Costco card. They let me hold my daughter in the picture. I thought it was hilarious. So now when we go, I say that my daughter needs to scan the Costco card. But there's me as a Costco member. And so I want you to think for a minute, what are types of drawings used in our profession? So I've used a few already that I've mentioned. So feel free to shout those out if you're by yourself in your living room or somewhere on campus taking this class online. And then our imaginary surprise would be a candy bar if you were here in person with me. But just take a second and think about that. Go ahead and pause. Okay, and now that you're back, I want you to come back and think about this. So there's an endless amount of drawings. There's floor plans, section cuts, site plans. There's floor plans on site plans, and I'll get into that. There's axonometric drawings. There's isometric drawings. Really, the list is endless. Do we need to know all of their names now? No. But I just want you to know that architects, we have a tremendous arsenal of drawings that we can use to sell ideas. So that's what I want you to take away from this. So today's focus will focus on these drawings listed here, and then drawings and content show are examples of presentation drawings, and these are not construction documents. So I want to make that very clear. So anything that has a title block on it, that has grid lines and dimensions and window tags and door tags and all of that, those really are construction drawings, okay? And we'll be focusing on a few steps actually that come before that. So I want you to think about, why is it so important to make beautiful drawings? And I say, why leave no crumbs? Why make impressive, beautiful drawings? So I'm here to tell you that first impressions matter, and a drawing is essentially a handshake. And if you have a sloppy drawing that's not very impressive, that's like a very light, weak handshake, okay? And beautiful drawings showcase artistry and high level of design. And like I said before, drawings are a craft. That is what we do. Drawings are our bread and our butter. You wake up every morning and you go to work and you work on drawings. You do a lot of other things too, but our end deliverable is drawings and always will be. And just way back in the day when architects drew by hand, literal physical drawings. Now they're digital, but the same principle applies. And I have an I don't know emoji after these last 2 points for a reason. So good drawings, do they equal a good architect? And do good drawings equal a good design? I want you to think about that, okay? I might have a different opinion than you, and I'll show you why, okay? So, pro tip number 9 in this course is embrace the cringy moments. There will be many. And this is a project from my second year of architecture school called Cripple Creek Cocoon. And this was a small dwelling for, looks like the couple was 55 and 47. So not elderly, upper middle age, I guess, maybe upper age, something like that, in Colorado. And it was supposed to mimic a cocoon. And I had a crit at a local architecture firm with this. We packed everything up and I presented in front of 5 real architects. And they said, you know what, Aaron? Beautiful drawings, awful design. And yeah, they're not wrong. I mean, I have no clue what's going on here. This is honestly like looking back at a bad haircut. Is that glass the black? Is it open to the air? I have no idea. Honestly, beautiful drawings. The trees look great and the line work is beautiful and it's very expressive, but I really couldn't tell you what's going on here. And so I have this little cringe emoji here of a monkey cringing his teeth. I submitted this and walked away like I didn't commit a literal crime. This on the surface looks pretty, but if you zoom in and examine the details, this haunts me in my dreams. So let's dive into this mess here. Beautiful drawings. Look at that line weight quality. Look at that little squiggly line, the overlapping lines. Everything's grounded, beautiful, color, shadow, shade, everything. However, what is going on with the design? What is all that black? Is that glazing? What's around the door? Is there a door frame? Is that door, it looks like it's on strings? I really couldn't tell you what's going on here. And as we dive in further, this toilet is literally the size of an M&M. That sink's the size of a Skittle. And I don't even know if someone's butt would fit on that chair. So I just want to, in the round bed, oh my goodness. Okay, so I'm hoping I'm proving my point that good drawings don't equal good design, but it is nice when good drawings do equal good design, okay? So let's dive into our first item, and I have a little beaver here because beavers are just taking a chunk out of things, and that's what I want us to do here. We're just taking a chunk of knowledge, a bite off that apple of knowledge, and really figuring out what these things are. So a site plan is a 2D view from above, and it often shows the whole site, and it can often show things like buildings, sidewalks, trees, cars, parks, benches, etc., plants, really anything. So here's an example I did years ago, almost a decade ago, and I actually merged the floor plan with the site plan because the lobby for this building is actually outdoors. This is a high-rise in downtown San Francisco, and that lobby is actually outside. And so there are people outside to help you and direct you where you need to go within the building, but that explains why the floor print is so minimal. And then you can see I have a dashed line around the floor plan that shows the building hanging above, up on the second, third, fourth floor, etc. Then I also showed plants because that was very important to the narrative. So you can see here it really depends on the design. And then another tip I have is to make sure to use various line weights. We'll be covering this later in the semester, but it's so important that you do this because you'll end up showing what's called hierarchy. And with thicker lines, things tend to be more important, and thinner, smaller lines show things that are less important. So I want you to look back at this plan, and you can see here, I've really emphasized with the block. This city block is very important, so I wanted to show how I was utilizing that. And then that floor plan, what we call the fill-in region, it's called the poche, is very strong within the floor plan to draw your attention there. And then the trees are lighter and gray, and then that furniture that's movable outside is a little darker so we can see it clearer. And then I have some more examples here that I've done from practice. So this is actually my front yard. I planted a whole garden and ended up being actually 400 plants, not this few. Maybe I'll take a picture and show it on here, but it's pretty cool. Planted a botanical garden in my yard, but you can show plants. And then sometimes like this, you'll want to show a loose, more conceptual site plan that can be hand sketched, just like this, all right? And then here's another one I've done from practice as well. This is for residents in Park City, and I just draw this on Procreate on my iPad, and this is their outdoor space. You can see they clearly have a lot of money, and then I also made a conceptual version of this that I showed prior to that last diagram to give them a better idea of how this was zoned. So more examples of site plans. We can have minimal information and have a focal point. Right here, I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with the other half of my yard. I was thinking a water feature. And then just another pro tip is color is great on a site plan, but make sure that it has meaning and it enriches the design. You don't have to render every square inch. So look back here. Do you see how I just rendered a certain area? There's no need to doll up that whole entire area. Here, for example, I left the home and the shed in the back blank, and here are all the plantings. So my front yard doesn't quite look like this. This was actually quite nuts. I was going to do the whole entire front of my house as a garden, but here's another example of a site plan. And then also you can fade out the less important items on a site plan to enhance your focal point. So here I opacitized the neighborhood and really emphasized this whole block that a community center I worked on way back in the day sits on in St. Paul, Minnesota. And then here are some more. These were actually drawn in Photoshop in a tablet. This was a museum design I did while I was in graduate school. Just a diagrammatic, more of a site plan view. And then also too, I mentioned this earlier, is when you have urban context with your site plan, it may be important to show the floor plan. And so remember, a floor plan is just the plan of a building, and it's usually cut at 4 feet above the floor, and it can show things like toilets, door swings, what else? Stairs, sinks, cupboards, cabinets, counters, all of that good stuff. And when we're in an urban environment like this, it can often be nice to show that immediate context outside because the people who are in these spaces, they're so jam-packed in there that it actually may be helpful for the architect to see the site plan while in working on the floor plan. So just a heads up there. And then here we have a version where the building itself is more of a white shape with a strong outline, and I'll tell you that's incredibly common here. And we also have a green roof right here. But this right here has a more of a realistic approach around it. And I just want to show you different concepts, different approaches. There are several, and honestly, there are no right approaches. The only approach that is right is the one that works for you. Okay, and here's another example of that urban environment mixed with the floor plan. And then also, when we're selecting color schemes, make sure that we're picking colors that work well with our project. Are those colors related to our project? Are we doing a project in the earth? Then maybe earth tones are acceptable. We're doing a project by the ocean. Okay, maybe something more nautical. But I want you to be very intentional with this, okay? And if you're going to do a bold color, there needs to be a reason for it. This right here harks back to a blueprint way back in the day. And I'm not quite sure what this project is, but for example, I'm going to make something up. We could say that this is an architectural history institution and museum and educational space. And that would make total sense. And then we can have something more simple with more of an airbrush look. And again, I'll show you all of this within Illustrator this semester in Photoshop. And then let's dive into section cuts. And so this is like essentially cutting into a cake. Cut through a building, typically the cut through portions of a wall and includes the roof and floor as solid. And then sometimes it can be 2D or 3D. And I'll show you examples of both. And so I want you to think about if you've ever bitten into a jelly-filled donut and been horrified. That's me. I hate jelly-filled donuts. Some people, my wife likes them. I think they are so gross. It is just very low quality jelly inside. It's not even real jelly. It's like really gooey, cheap stuff from Costco they buy in bulk. Anyways, I shouldn't say that. Costco's our fictitious sponsor. I'll say delicious jam from Costco. But think about if we had a section cut next to this. That would show us what's inside this donut. So I want you to remember section cuts as a jelly-filled donut cut in half. And here's some examples of section cuts. They can cascade down a hill and showcase how people traverse through space. Or this building I worked on here, they can be more static and informational and show you the circulation and how people enter and exit the building. Or they could be more playful. This is a project I did about a decade ago, and it actually is a laser cut house for a fish. And I will show you more examples of this later. But the really important thing about your sections is grounding them with the heavy fill line. Otherwise, it's floating in space and it's lost in the sauce. Right here, do you see that really big gray thick area grounding this building? And then we have the roof, floors, and walls colored in solid. Then here again, we have another great example of grounding. Just remember, if you don't ground your buildings, I will ground you. And if time permits and you are allowed to do so in your presentation, adding entourage, which is just a fancy word for people, vegetation, shadows, any additional items can be super powerful. And some people might be like, why are your people red? This isn't my drawing, by the way, but things could be red because maybe that person wants to emphasize the people a lot. And this project could be about how people are staged throughout the space. So just think about that as you're picking colors of your people. And here they made the poche, which is the fill-in of the lines, red. And this could be, maybe this is a performance space. It looks like there's a theater hall, and red could hark to that. So you can have fun with these. They don't have to be as static. Here, this is one of my favorite buildings by Marcel Breuer. It's Our Lady of Annunciation Chapel at University of Mary. And you can see here a very thick grounded line. Not necessarily texture needed, but just a really thick grounding line. And then we have texture on the walls inside showing the locally harvest field stone, which is super cool. This stone right here is actually just from a hop, skip, and a jump from site down the hill. And then we have, those are actually nuns in the rendering. Nuns, they don't like solely run this place, but they're a huge part of this institution. And then we have our bell tower. And then another Marcel Breuer drawing. This is just a 3D version of a section cut showing how all of the systems run through the building. So this could be, it looks like electrical, and we have some sort of heating, ventilation, and air conditioning as well. Maybe not air conditioning. Marcel Breuer typically didn't put that in his buildings in the 1960s. That's something that happened more towards the end of the 20th century. And here's another example, same people that did the filled in red walls, but I want to show you how powerful doing little highlights like that frosted red behind the staircase. Yes, there won't be glowing red things in the building. However, we can have a little fun with our drawings and be a little dramatic. Here's another example at a larger scale showing a section cut of a whole site. We'll actually do this on our project this semester, so I wanted to throw that in there. They can also be very conceptual. This is just a silly little sketch. So they come in all shapes and sizes, really, and flavors. And one of my favorite things are collages. So we're moving on to a new type of drawing. These are less common in practice. However, I will say I've done them at most places I've worked. Most people don't. But it's really an artistic mashup of elements that draw the viewer in, and they work so well for covers of presentations. So this right here was actually used on the cover of a presentation towards Park City, their city board, to pitch a multi-family housing, affordable housing project there in Park City, and it was approved. And I'm just throwing things in here that really relate to the site and the Olympics, all of that, the history of the train, skiing. And so if you need a cool, flashy title page, try collage. And then here are more that were in that presentation. Another one as well. And then also too, I realize this and I respect this. A collage could be a little too delulu or delusional for you. You may not like it, and that's fine. I'm just giving you exposure to different kinds of drawings, and this is a more abstract approach, but I will also show you realistic collages as well. So here's a take on a collage, but a tish more realistic. It's not all the spaces equally spaced, like these would not be that close in real life. This is just exaggeration to show you how the finishes, material, and equipment all interact with each other in the color scheme. So this is a coffee shop I designed in northern Iceland that's actually at the foothills of a volcano. I unfortunately did not win the competition, just had a ton of fun doing it. So I wanted to show you how as a licensed interior designer as well as architect, how I think about that. And then here are just some close-ups for you to enjoy. Feel free to pause if needed. Or they could be more realistic and show finishes. So this is finishes I made for a bathroom design, some fixtures, furniture, and equipment for a dining space. The same thing, but for a living space. The same thing again, but this is actually for a city hall in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, very close to where I grew up. And I did one also for a museum design that I did in graduate school to give you a little vignette or sample of what an interior may look like without being too literal. So there's still some play we can have here. I'm just suggesting an idea. And then here's a suggestion of what the exterior could look like. And this is something I did early on in the design process. or they can be mega abstract. So there's this competition called K-Rob, where these drawings I'm showing you come from, and these are collages, and they can be very abstract. And if that's not your cup of tea, I totally understand, okay? Like we even have a hot glue gun in here. And then this one too is actually from the student's thesis that won first place, I believe, in the digital category. So just more exposure here to different drawings in our profession. And then another crazy, outrageous one. And then one that's a little more straightforward. And this is one I made of that laser cut house I showed you for fish. And I have actual photos in here of the model. And then one thing I want to bring to your attention are laser cut models. They are in a way drawings because we have to draw them in 2D, likely in AutoCAD, so they can be cut. Then we can assemble them. So think of them as really the bridge between 2D and 3D. Okay, and then here's just some concept models I made. I believe most of these might be my work, but make sure to add people. Here's another tip. It's really important to add people and especially have them doing things that are native to that environment. That will just help things appear a little bit more realistic. And I'll show you an example of maybe why that's important. Okay, so I have my cringe monkey again. This was a plaza design I did in Fargo. You can see, why are people doing the tango? And why do I literally have a million sets of the same people? I could have been a little more creative and taken 5 more minutes to draw out a few more people and trace them in my file. And what is this person doing? I don't know if they're asking for money or if they're like dishing up a hot dog and sitting on a box or something. But I just want you to think that, man, looking back at this is like looking at a bad haircut. But just be intentional with the people you place, okay? And then here, oh man, this is super old. Many years old. Yes, so this was my first year of architecture school. Yes, I realize this is really ugly, but I would always have people with balloons. I thought it was super cool. Looking back at it, no. And then here are some examples. This is what I envision us potentially doing this semester. And if you're an online student, I'll coach you through how to do this and coordinate a visit to campus. But these are from a firm called Make Shop, and just beautiful acrylic and plywood models. And then here's that goldfish model I was telling you about, a little house for a fish. This is a super fun project. These fish died from the acrylic fumes about 24 hours afterwards, so I felt a little bad about that. But still a cool project, but yeah, was not very responsible. And here's a structural model I've done. And you can see all the floor plates here. This was of a high rise. And then make sure when you make models that you're taking great photos of them and take them on a white background or a black background, like a cloth or a piece of foam board. We do have a photo room at Slick, and I can show you that if you ever come in person. And then here's that structural model on a white background I showed you earlier. A rooftop bar model I've made. This was actually from school years ago. This was a culinary arts school. I have some acrylic and lit up the interior. This was a plaza design I've done. I incorporated some white colored pencil to show the tree canopy. And then I have some people walking around and some smart cars parked. And then here I have some people entering a structural model. And then here's just a silly concept model I've done. Here's a project that I've done that showcases how to use models. So I actually pin them to my boards. I like to do that. Just be intentional with how they're being presented because they definitely are too precious to go on the floor. Here is a professional model from Pascual Asio Architects. And then I have more too from other architects, so feel free to pause and look up these people on Instagram. And then here's some student work I found online. We can carve in facades as well. We can do some really, really nice, neat work. We can even do it in all white. Here's more of an abstract approach with a residence, and then even a large urban scale. And then this is baby Aaron way back when, and I used a laser cutter to create some molds. And this was part of creating a model for a furniture class. And right here, I casted these elements in concrete up on top. And I did that by creating a laser cut mold, and I'll show you that. So moving forward, you can see I have my laser cut elements down here, and then some concrete on top. And I just attached that with nuts and bolts. And make sure to take process photos of physical works. They help explain your process in your portfolio and can be really helpful, especially towards architecture admissions when you're applying somewhere. And here's an example of me decasting that mold and assembling the concrete portion. So here's another photo here of me actually casting the concrete, and then I have some elements that allow the rods to screw in later. And then let's dive into diagrams. And diagrams can really be anything. They can be 2D, 3D, they can be overlaid over a photo. But what they're essentially doing is furthering the viewer's understanding of the design. They can be highly conceptual or they can be very straightforward, but either way, they're teaching the audience something new about a design. So right here, I have a floor plan that's just very diagrammatic. I don't even have any doors, so that's one option you can do with diagrams. And then here, I'm showcasing multiple diagrams together that tell a story. And these right here are telling a strong story of site elements. So wind, tree location, summer and shade, and vehicle and foot traffic. And then down below, I even created a little map that shows activities of when they happen on the site. So just keep in mind, this is something that we can definitely do in this class as well. Here I have a structural model, the one that you saw earlier, and I just overlaid some lines over it to show some commonalities between the 3D model and floor plan, and then I showed them down below here as well. They can even be larger and more factual and show growth of a city, like this example here. Or they can be isolated to one building and showcase an existing floor plan down below, which I drew, and then showcasing different areas where we can put new spaces. This is also an example from practice, very, very conceptual, showcasing a floor plan down below, and then even, this is not even a floor plan, just a conceptual diagram of where spaces go in a building and how they match to a design principle that was set forth. So when making a diagram, I want you to ask yourself, how can this enhance my design and teach the audience something? So right here in this diagram, I'm showcasing movement through the red arrow, and it's help supporting the end result of each design. So I could explain it further and it'd make more sense, but I want you to think about, how does this diagram help tell this story, okay? And so there really are endless diagrams. We can even have diagrams that are line work overlaid over a photo, like here, or silly little sketches you do on your iPad within a few minutes. Maybe they can showcase sound within an urban environment, view corridors, or potentially if you create an app, I actually did this in practice at a firm, it can show you just the different process that goes on within that app. So I want you to think about process drawings and think about doing them by hand and putting them in your portfolio, not all of them, but some of them. And you can even do them in Procreate and really fake that hand look. But here's a drawing I did in Procreate. So this was not done with pen and pencil. This was done in Apple Pencil and iPad, showcasing that app design from earlier. And these are some from people on Instagram. They can even be more formal and utilize a fun color to emphasize certain areas of the design. Or they can be axonometric and deconstruct a design and show you how it's assembled. They can be 3D and showcase a site, or potentially more abstract and show different textures and nature within a space or an outdoor plaza. Here's an example of a sketch, and this one right here is displaying a 3D view of how a conference room operates. This is an exploded axon drawing here, and this one's telling us about the different spaces on each level, it looks like, or how they nest. And then another nesting example too. And one of our last drawing types are rendered floor plans. This is more popular in interior design, but I wanted to go over it briefly. So these are just materials applied to your floor plan, and maybe, potentially, the topography shown in some trees. And you can even make these in Revit if you try hard enough. Here's an example. It could be pushed a little further, but it's just a little example of using sketchy lines and shadows. Here's an example of a more polished version. Some can be even more colorful or black and white or more of a blueprint style. but they are super diverse. So I want you to know that. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you don't know by now, I absolutely am obsessed with Grogu from The Mandalorian, and I kindly ask that you do not refer to him as Baby Yoda, as that is highly offensive, because him and Yoda are different individual beings, and calling him Baby Yoda minimizes his existence. So thank you for listening to my TED Talk, and make sure to check out the PowerPoint slides and also a PDF version here available on Canvas. If you have any questions, go ahead and shoot me a message. Thank you so much.